How does a 5-year-old little girl vanish without a trace? The disappearance of Summer Wells from her home in June 2021 has captivated a nation and left a family desperately searching for answers. With speculation running wild online, we're diving into the facts to separate reality from rumor. Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Their Voice Matters, where we dig into true crime stories that deserve to be told with clarity and care. My goal is to amplify the voices of those who can no longer speak for themselves and explore the deeper questions their cases raise. Summer Moon Utah Wells was born on February 4th, 2016, to Dawn Wells and Candace Bly. She lived with her family in the Beach Creek community of rural Hawkins County, Tennessee, a region known for its dense forests, rolling mountains, and winding rivers. To give you an idea of just how remote this area is, Hawkins County has a population of just 56,000 people. Summer is the youngest of 4 siblings, growing up alongside her 3 older brothers in the family's home on Ben Hill Road. She also had 2 older half-siblings from Dawn's previous marriage. Her maternal grandmother, also named Candace, lived on the property as well. For clarity, since both Summer's mother and her grandmother share the same name, I'll refer to her mother as Candace and her grandmother as Grandma. The Wells home was tucked away on a steep hill, barely visible from the road. It was a secluded area, one you'd have to know about to find. Inside, the living conditions were cramped and cluttered, with a makeshift staircase leading down to the basement. That basement, where Summer and her parents had their bedrooms, also had a door leading directly outside, a detail that would become significant in her case. Despite challenges at home, Summer was a bright spot in everyone's lives. A spirited, playful little girl, Summer was known for her endless energy. She was affectionate and loved attention, especially at church, where her teacher Robin Lane became one of her favorite people. She was a mix of princess and tomboy, just as happy twirling in a dress as she was running barefoot through the dirt. She loved being outside, and one of her favorite places was to be on her swing in their yard. Family and friends described Summer as the boss of the family, often giving her older brothers a run for their money. She was eagerly looking forward to starting kindergarten later that fall and had even picked out her first day outfit. Coincidentally, it was the same outfit she was wearing on the day she disappeared. In many of the photos shared publicly, you'll notice Summer had a short, buzzed haircut. There's been a lot of speculation about why her hair was cut that way, but several different explanations have been given. Her parents said she either wanted her hair short like her brothers, had cut it herself and they evened it out, or that it was just a practical summer cut. Ultimately, we don't know for sure, but it's clear her hair length was a personal or practical choice, not something with confirmed significance to her disappearance. According to Summer's family, June 15th started out as a normal Tuesday. That morning, Grandma was experiencing knee pain and needed to go to the hospital for treatment. So Candace, Summer, and Grandma got into the truck and made the 25-minute drive to Kingsport. Dawn went to work in Jonesboro, about 40 to 45 minutes away, and Summer's 3 older brothers stayed home, playing video games and watching TV. After dropping off Grandma at the hospital, Candace and Summer met up with 15-year-old Hunter, a friend of the family. There are conflicting accounts about how this meetup happened. Candace says Hunter called her. Hunter claims Candace was the one who reached out to him. And Hunter's mother, Allie, said Candace just showed up at their house. Regardless, Candace picked him up between 10 and 10:30 a.m. Despite a strained relationship between Candace and Allie, Hunter remained close to Summer and the Wells family, describing Summer as a little sister. The plan was to take Summer swimming at what they called the watering hole at Warriors Path State Park, a quiet spot near the horse stables. But before they could go, Grandma called and said she was ready to be picked up from the hospital. After picking her up, they went through the drive-thru at Walgreens to drop off her prescription. At this point, according to Hunter, Dawn called Candace asking how things were going, and he mentioned a man who he believed was lurking around their property. Candace denies this, saying Dawn never mentioned anything about a stranger. Since Dawn was supposed to be at work in Jonesboro, how he would have known that there was a person supposedly there is unclear. With about 30 minutes to wait for the prescription, they made a few stops. They first went to a smoke shop where they bought nicotine vapes and a twisted tea, which is an alcoholic beverage. Then they headed to the watering hole. Hunter claims Candace gave him the twisted tea there, but Candace disputes this, saying it was actually for Grandma. Summer was already in her swimsuit, and she jumped right into the water. Grandma stayed in the truck, adding minutes to her prepaid phone. After a few minutes, Candace went to help her get from the truck down to the water. Candace, Grandma, and Hunter were watching TikToks together, and Candace even filmed a short video of Summer playing in the water. After about 15 to 20 minutes, they left and stopped at the Hippie House, which is a legal dispensary selling CBD and vape products. Hunter and Summer stayed in the truck while Candace and Grandma went inside. Then they returned to Walgreens to pick up Grandma's prescription. They stopped at Sonic for some slushies, and they went grocery shopping at Price Less, which is a discount store. There is a discrepancy on the timing. Candace says they were inside for less than 5 minutes, while Hunter claims it was closer to an hour. At some point, Summer fell asleep. Hunter and his family say she was already asleep when they arrived back at Hunter's house around 2:30 p.m. while Candace says she was awake until they got closer to home. So by mid-afternoon, Summer had already had a full day. Hospital visit, swimming, errands, and now she was asleep in the truck, captured unknowingly in what would become the last image of her ever seen. As they arrived home, Candace got out of the truck to unlock the chain blocking their driveway, and then drove up the steep, rocky road to the house. According to Candace and Grandma, here's what happened next. Candace woke Summer up and got the boys to help bring in the groceries. Summer played with her toys on the kitchen floor while the boys watched TV. Grandma decided that she wanted to transplant flowers near her camper. Candace asked if Summer wanted to help, and she eagerly joined in. She even placed some of her favorite Paw Patrol toys in the flower pots. They finished planting about 30 minutes later. Summer went into Grandma's camper to grab a piece of candy before heading back towards the house. Candace walked with her part of the way. It was only about 40 or 50 feet, and she told the boys to keep an eye on her. Candace then stepped away very briefly to help Grandma with her knee brace at her camper. She estimates that she was only gone for 2 to 5 minutes. This seemed like any ordinary afternoon, but within minutes, everything would change. When Candace went back inside, she didn't see Summer, and she asked the boys where she was. They said, oh, she went downstairs to play with her toys. Candace went to the bar area of the house, where the set of makeshift stairs led down to the basement, and she called for Summer, but she got no answer, which she said was unusual. Summer always answered her. So she went downstairs to look for her, but Summer wasn't down there. Candace says she doesn't remember if the basement door that led outside was locked or not. Thinking maybe Summer had just gone to her swing, she ran outside, but Summer wasn't there either. It was like she had vanished. Candace said, quote, when I couldn't find Summer downstairs, I came outside on top of the hill and hollered for her and told the boys that she wasn't down there. I went outside and called Donnie right away. Don told her to call 911 and immediately started driving home, racing to get there as soon as he could. Candace called 911, and she actually used her mom's phone, the one that she had put minutes on earlier at the watering hole, to make the call. She said it would have better reception. Don also called 911 on his way home. The 911 calls came in around 6:30 p.m. 911 said they were sending people out, but Candace wasn't just going to sit there and wait for the police to get there. So she got in the truck and she drove down the driveway, started searching anywhere and everywhere that she could think of. When Don got home, he made the 45-minute drive in about half an hour. He said at that point, he just knew Summer had been abducted. So that's the official timeline, at least according to the family. But as we'll see, some details just don't quite seem to add up. By the time police arrived, Summer was still nowhere to be found, and the search efforts began immediately. What followed would become one of the most frustrating and controversial missing child cases in recent memory. If you found this case as fascinating as I have, be sure to like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments. Your voice can help keep attention on stories like this one. Let's take a look at the timeline and the early hours and days of the investigation. Law enforcement arrived to the house at around 7 p.m. and immediately began investigating. The Hawkins County Sheriff's Office and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, or the TBI, worked together on the case, launching large-scale ground searches in the rugged terrain surrounding the Wells home. Over the following weeks, search crews combed more than 3,000 acres using ground teams, helicopters, drones, scent dogs, and cadaver dogs. Authorities didn't know if Summer had wandered off and gotten lost or if something more sinister had happened. At that point, they weren't ruling anything out. Everyone was a suspect. Just after midnight on June 16th, the TBI issued an endangered child alert, and approximately 12 hours later, it was upgraded to an Amber Alert, which remains active to this day. Meanwhile, Candace frantically called friends, letting them know that Summer was missing. One of those calls was to Hunter. At first, he didn't even believe her. He thought she was joking. He had just seen Summer a few hours earlier. As the reality set in, some friends gathered at the Wells home to support the family and to look for little Summer. By nightfall, worry deepened. If Summer was out there, she was alone, scared, and probably cold. On June 16th, Hunter claimed that Candace told him she was taking a polygraph test at the police station. Both Candace and Dawn underwent polygraphs in the days following Summer's disappearance, and both reportedly passed. However, polygraphs are not foolproof and are inadmissible in court. Law enforcement often uses them as an investigative tool, but they can't definitively prove deception or honesty. While the results were interesting, they had to be taken with caution. The search for Summer pressed on, with the authorities and volunteers scouring the area. Then, on June 17th, just 2 days after Summer vanished, Hunter said that Candace unexpectedly showed up at his house. Police had been interviewing those close to the Wells family, including Hunter, and he believed Candace was anxious about what he told investigators. According to Hunter, he simply recounted their timeline on June 15th. However, he alleged that Candace specifically asked him not to mention the twisted tea, likely because he was underage. As days passed with no sign of Summer, Candace and Dawn took to social media and the media, desperately trying to spread awareness about their missing daughter. To some, Dawn and Candace appeared to be grieving parents, doing everything they could to bring Summer home. Dawn Wells pleaded, quote, we love our daughter with all our hearts. We miss her. We will do anything to have her back. Summer holds my heart in her little hands, and I love her with all my heart. But to others, something seemed a little bit off. Suspicion quickly turned towards the Wells family, and backlash followed. Accusations spread online, and soon the harassment extended beyond social media. People weren't just questioning Dawn and Candace. They were outraged, convinced that the parents knew more than they were saying. As the initial investigation unfolded, a few early leads emerged that caught the attention of both law enforcement and the public. Two key pieces of information stood out: a neighbor's chilling account of a scream heard in the woods around the time Summer disappeared, and a mysterious red truck reportedly seen near the property. One of the first concerning reports came from Jody Sue, a neighbor who lived close to the Wells property. She recalled hearing a scream about an hour before Summer was reported missing, one that she described as unnatural and deeply unsettling. Quote, "It stopped all three of us cold. We knew it was wrong. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't an animal." Jody Sue and her son stepped outside to investigate, but saw nothing unusual at the time. However, around 6 p.m., she went outside again and heard Candace calling for Summer. That's when she remembered the scream earlier and immediately felt something was wrong. She joined the search efforts, helping Summer's brothers look near the creek that ran along the road at the bottom of their property. Despite the eerie nature of her account, police later stated they had ruled out the scream and didn't believe it was connected to Summer's disappearance. About a week and a half after Summer vanished, on June 26th, authorities made a public appeal regarding a potential lead. They had received a tip about a 1998 to 2000 red or maroon Toyota Tacoma with a ladder rack in its bed that was seen in the area on the night of Summer's disappearance. Investigators urged the driver or anyone who might have seen the truck to come forward. However, to this day, the driver remains unidentified, and law enforcement has not disclosed whether the vehicle was ever located. At one point, some people online speculated that a red truck owned by Robin, Summer's Sabbath school teacher, could have been the one in question. However, she clarified that she purchased that truck months after Summer's disappearance, and there's no known reason to doubt this. In cases like this, law enforcement often examines family members' backgrounds, not to assign blame prematurely, but because understanding a child's home environment can reveal crucial clues. And in this case, both Dawn and Candace had criminal records. While having a record doesn't automatically mean they were involved in Summer's disappearance, it does provide important context when evaluating the bigger picture. Let's start with Dawn. Between 1990 and 2001 in Utah, Dawn was charged with and incarcerated for aggravated assault, interfering with a public servant, forgery, burglary of a dwelling, and theft. In 2006 to 2007, he was charged with possession of controlled counterfeit substances without a prescription and burglary in Arkansas, and was sentenced to 4 years probation. In October 2020, in Tennessee, Dawn was charged with domestic assault, possession of a handgun while under the influence, and unlawful possession of a weapon. This was the result of an altercation between Dawn, Candace, Grandma, and a man who was staying at their house, Jose. Before we get into the October 14th, 2020 incident, we need to back up several months to understand Jose's connection to the Wells family. This is based on Jose's account of his time with the family. While this is his version of events, it provides insight into what life was like in the home before and after Dawn returned from Utah. Jose was introduced to Candace through a mutual friend, Andrew, who is Hunter's father. Looking for a fresh start, Jose traveled to Tennessee with several other people, expecting to move into a house. But when those plans fell through, he found himself with nowhere to go. So Candace offered him a place to stay at her home. At first, he was grateful, but his feelings quickly changed once he arrived. As soon as they pulled up to the house, the truck was surrounded by barking dogs, which made Jose really uneasy. He described the home as being in poor condition, cluttered, unclean, and infested with bugs. What shocked him the most was the lack of privacy. The bathroom had no walls, just an open toilet, sink, and shower in the back of the house. Jose also met 2 of Candace's children who had been left home alone while she and Summer were out. Their 2 older boys. Dawn was away in Utah with their oldest son at the time, so Jose hadn't met them yet. Over time, he started noticing more and more red flags. He said Candace drank heavily every night and would get into heated arguments with Dawn over the phone. He was also concerned about the children's welfare. He claimed they mostly lived on junk food and that their mother's friend, Allie, would sometimes drive all the way to Kingsport, 25 minutes away, to bring them decent meals. While staying at the home, Jose took on the role of cooking, cleaning, and helping the kids with their homework. Jose ended up staying at the house for around 6 months, eventually getting a part-time job. There are conflicting stories about why Jose was there. Candace claimed that he stayed there because he was in a relationship with Allie, but Jose said they only hooked up briefly and were never together. Regardless, Jose's experience gives us rare insight into daily life inside Summer's home in the months leading up to her disappearance. In October 2020, Dawn returned home from Utah with their oldest son. According to him, Candace had been using Jose to make him jealous and lure him back. At first, everything was fine, but within a few days, tensions in the house started to rise. Jose said that Dawn drank heavily and frequently fought with Candace. More than that, he claimed that Dawn's behavior around the children actually made him uncomfortable. One major concern for Jose was that Dawn would sometimes shower with Summer, who was 4 years old at the time. He felt this was inappropriate, and he says he once removed her from the shower himself. After that, he claims Dawn began bathing with the boys instead. Jose also said that he witnessed Dawn yelling at and hitting the children, and even threatening them with his belt. Within a week of Dawn's return, things really started to escalate. On the night of October 14th, 2020, Jose was half asleep in the basement when he was jolted awake by loud noises. He rushed upstairs and found Dawn and Candace in a heated altercation. When Jose tried to step in, he claimed Dawn threw a beer bottle at him, chipping his tooth. Candace and her mother tried to break up the fight. And as Dawn stormed off out of the house and drove off, Candace called the police. As they arrived to take statements, Dawn returned home. He was given a DUI test. Candace told him Dawn had a firearm in his glove box, and when officers searched his truck, they found that weapon, something he was not allowed to have due to his prior felony convictions. Dawn was arrested on charges of domestic assault, possession of a handgun while under the influence, and unlawful possession of a weapon. Jose remained at the house for 3 more days, with Grandma driving him to and from work. Eventually, he decided to leave, and he asked her to drive him to Rock Hill, South Carolina, where he had plans to move in with someone he'd met online. The day after the incident, on October 15th, Candace filed for an order of protection against Dawn, stating, "He drinks and throws things. I am afraid of being hurt. He is abusive physically and mentally toward me. I'm afraid for my children and myself. My mother fears he is going to hurt her because she is staying in her camper on the property. 4 days later, she had the order dismissed, claiming it was a mistake. In April 2021, Dawn pled guilty to possession of a handgun while under the influence, while the domestic assault charge was dropped. He was sentenced to just under a year of probation, community service, and his gun was forfeited to the state. Continuing with Dawn's criminal record, in October 2021, he was arrested for driving under the influence. Since this was in violation of his probation from the October 2020 incident, he was sentenced to serve the remainder of his nearly 1-year sentence at the Hawkins County Jail. So that's Dawn's criminal record. Let's talk about Candace. She doesn't have nearly as lengthy of a criminal record as Dawn does, but she did plead guilty to misdemeanor domestic abuse charges back in 2003. I wasn't able to find much on those charges. Beyond her legal history, Candace also has experienced personal tragedy. Her sister, Rosemarie Bly, went missing from Wisconsin in 2009. And has never been found. Investigators have stated there's no known connection between Rose's case and Summer's disappearance, but it's an unusual and tragic coincidence in Candace's past. While past criminal records don't automatically indicate guilt or involvement in Summer's disappearance, they do provide context about Dawn and Candace as individuals and the environment Summer was raised in. Understanding their history helps paint a clearer picture of the circumstances surrounding this case. There have been a lot of allegations against Dawn Wells. Before we get into this, I want to give a trigger warning for SA, specifically child SA. If you need to skip this part, that's totally okay. You can go to the timestamp here and catch up with us there. While Dawn Wells has a criminal record, there are some allegations against him that have never been prosecuted. Some of his family members, including his stepsisters, Mary and Jeannie, have accused him of SA when they were children. These allegations only came to light after Summer's disappearance, with Mary and Jeannie saying, "Summer gave us the courage to speak out." Jeannie, Dawn's younger stepsister, says the abuse began when she was just 5 years old and lasted for 7 years, starting when Dawn was around 12 or 13. She said she wasn't the only victim, but others were too afraid to speak up. It only stopped when she told her mother, who was horrified. However, she felt that Dawn's father downplayed what Dawn had been doing to her. Jeannie's daughter, Trish, has also alleged that Dawn acted inappropriately towards her, making her sit on his lap and touching her over her clothes. Mary has accused Dawn of attempting to SA her when they were both 13. She said Dawn and 2 of his friends tried to assault her, but she was able to fight them off and escape. At first, Dawn denied the allegations, claiming his stepsisters were motivated by a dispute over their father's property in Utah. He accused them of lying and calling the TBI to falsely claim that he had harmed Summer. However, in recorded phone calls with Mary, Dawn admitted to abusing Jeannie, though he insisted that it was her fault. He said, quote, "She played along with the game, and she needed to take responsibility for her role in it." He also claimed, quote, "She was never hurt in any way, and if anybody's a monster, it's her." She was 5 years old. Jeannie and Mary have also claimed that Dawn has a long history of drug use, including substances that left track marks on his arms and legs. They also allege that Dawn's first wife once arrived home in tears, saying that he had attempted to sell their son for drug money. Mary recalled, quote, "It was 11 or 12 o'clock at night. She said she had to pick up little Donnie because Dawn had taken him to go sell drugs." Jeannie confirmed. Quote, "He did try to sell little Donnie. I was there that day." However, there is no documented evidence supporting this claim, and Dawn denies that this happened. He says he doesn't even remember the incident. Perhaps most disturbingly, Dawn has also admitted in a recorded phone call to Mary that he has been in places where children were trafficked, saying, quote, "I've been to some places in California where there were some little kids, where people were trying to sell these little kids." He didn't give any other context or clarify this statement. While unproven legally, these allegations are important to acknowledge because they shape the public perception of Dawn's character, influencing speculation on Summer's disappearance. As weeks turned into months, the large-scale search efforts gradually scaled down, though they never stopped entirely. In the fall of 2021, authorities launched another intensive search, hoping that the thinner brush would increase their chances of finding evidence. This effort brought together 12 law enforcement agencies and 120 scent tracking dogs, yet no trace of Summer was found. Around the same time, Hawkins County Sheriff Ronnie Lawson stated that while the Wells family had been cooperating, there was, quote, no evidence that Summer was kidnapped or abducted. This statement cast further uncertainty about what truly happened that day. By the spring of 2022, the sheriff said that the family was no longer cooperating with the investigation and that they had obtained attorneys. However, both Candace and Summer's grandmother denied this, insisting that they had remained available to authorities and had not retained legal representation. Dawn later expressed frustration with law enforcement, saying, quote, "They intimidated us, they belittled us, and they did everything they could amidst all the chaos." Despite ongoing searches and investigative efforts, there were no major breakthroughs in the case. In June 2023, the TBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released the first age progression image of Summer, depicting what she might look like at age 7 in the hopes of generating renewed leads. A year later, in 2024, the TBI provided another update, reiterating that the case remains active and is not considered a cold case, meaning investigators are still receiving tips and actively working leads. Officials acknowledged two main possibilities: abduction or that Summer wandered off. They did not mention any suspicion of foul play by the family. Over the years, there have been a handful of reported sightings of girls who resembled Summer, including one as recently as 2024. But after being investigated, none of these leads have panned out. While false sightings can be discouraging, they also serve as a reminder that people haven't given up looking for Summer, and that her face is still being recognized and remembered. Now that we've laid out the basics of what happened the day Summer vanished and the ensuing investigation, let's explore the theories and what might have been missed. As the investigation into Summer Wells' disappearance continues, several theories have been put forward, but we still don't have any definitive answers. Investigators say they're exploring all possibilities. They say they've received over 6,500 tips and they've looked into them all. There are also a lot of theories coming from online speculation. Let's go over the main theories that have captured attention. One of the primary theories that law enforcement has considered was that Summer was abducted. Don Wells has repeatedly stated that he thinks this is what happened. They have insisted there is no way Summer would have just left the property on her own, that someone took her from their home, likely either from in the basement or near the basement door, and took her across the driveway, through the brush, down the steep hill, and into a waiting vehicle on the road. Quote, "I know she didn't walk away from this property by herself or off this yard. I feel in my heart that somebody has came up here and took her or lured her away from here," said Candace. This theory may be supported in part by the search dogs used in the initial investigation. It's reported that the dogs followed Summer's scent down a path leading to Ben Hill Road, where the trail abruptly ended. So this could suggest that she was picked up by a vehicle. However, no physical evidence has been found to confirm an abduction, nor has law enforcement publicly identified any suspects. If Summer was abducted, who could have taken her? Dawn and Candace have suggested that someone in the local community may have taken Summer, specifically pointing to people involved with drugs in the area. Hawkins County is a rural and economically challenged region, and just like so many other areas like this, it has had its struggles with addiction issues. But as of now, there's been no public evidence directly connecting anyone involved in drug activity to Summer's disappearance. Law enforcement has not confirmed this theory, though they have said that all possibilities remain on the table. The Cornbread Mafia is an organized crime ring in the South and Midwest involved in marijuana trafficking. However, there is no known connection between this group and child trafficking, and they have not been active for decades. Stranger abduction is another theory, but according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, non-family abductions are exceedingly rare, making up only 1% of missing children's cases. Human trafficking is another theory that's been put forward. While it is a possibility, according to the Polaris Project, which is an organization focused on human trafficking statistics, fewer than 10% of trafficking cases involve kidnapping. According to Candace, there were workers cutting down and trimming trees near the property in the days leading up to Summer's disappearance. Candace has stated that she told the TBI about these tree trimmers, but law enforcement has never mentioned them as a possible lead. Dudley is another lead. He is a man Dawn worked with and fired the day before Summer disappeared, and he is someone Dawn himself has pointed to as a potential suspect. We'll discuss Dudley further in a little bit. One of the biggest questions about this theory is, What about the dogs? The Wells property was known to have multiple dogs that would aggressively bark at strangers. Yet, on the day Summer disappeared, there were no reports of the dogs reacting to anything unusual. Also, an abductor would have had to act quickly, avoid being seen, and get past multiple people on the property. While an abduction can't be ruled out, the circumstances surrounding it remain unclear, leaving many questions unanswered. While Dawn and Candace insist that Summer would have never wandered off, others who knew the family said she'd done this before. According to Jose, who was the former house guest, Summer had previously left the house unnoticed on multiple occasions. Once making it all the way down to a neighbor's home, and another time going all the way down the steep driveway to the road before being found. While some believe an outsider was responsible for Summer's disappearance, others wonder if the answer could lie closer to home. It's important to remember that public suspicion is not evidence, and no family members have ever been charged or named as suspects in Summer's disappearance. As with many cases of missing children, the family becomes the focal point of the investigation. While law enforcement has said that the Wells family has cooperated, they also acknowledged that the possibilities are still on the table. One thing that stood out to some people was that in interviews, Dawn and Candace frequently spoke about Summer in the past tense. Was this just a subconscious slip? A reflection of losing hope, or something more telling? Trauma can impact the way people speak about a missing loved one, but to some, their wording raised suspicion. During a 2021 appearance on the Dr. Phil show, Candace reacted strongly when she was pressed about the timeline of the day Summer disappeared and what could have happened to her. She removed her microphone and walked off the set. This just fueled speculation. Was she simply overwhelmed, or did she know more than she was sharing? The Wells family was no stranger to the Department of Child Services, or DCS. Reports suggest that DCS had been involved with the family before Summer disappeared. A Facebook post from Candace, dated June 12, 2020, indicates that someone had reported them to DCS a full year before Summer went missing. Additionally, Allie, Hunter's mother, claimed that DCS had been called multiple times regarding the welfare of the Wells kids. She alleged that when DCS came in for inspections or drug tests, Dawn and Candace were given advance notice, giving them time to prepare and possibly manipulate their situation to appear more favorable. 1 month after Summer's disappearance, in July 2021, the Wells' 3 older sons were removed from the home by DCS. Dawn and Candace later signed over their parental rights. Some online theories, and even statements from Dawn himself, have raised the possibility of trafficking. While horrifying, such cases do occur. According to the Polaris Project, it is not uncommon for parents or family members to sell children in exchange for money, drugs, or something of value. Adding to the speculation, Dawn himself once claimed to have been at a place in California where children were being sold. This raises unsettling questions. How did he know about places like this? Why was he even there? And could he have been involved in something similar? However, no public evidence currently supports this theory, and law enforcement has not confirmed it as a primary focus. Another theory centers around someone known to the Wells, someone Dawn himself brought into the spotlight, a man named Dudley. Dawn pointed to him as a potential suspect since Dudley was fired by Dawn just 1 day before Summer disappeared. But is there any real reason to suspect him? Dudley worked with Dawn in construction, and their working relationship was strained. According to Dudley, Dawn was often under the influence on the job. He was slow and disliked by their coworkers. Dudley even went so far as to request reassignment to a different job site, telling their boss, quote, "This dude is crazy. There's something wrong with him." He believes Dawn saw him as a threat, fearing he could be replaced. On Monday, June 14th, the day before Summer disappeared, Dudley recalls Dawn behaving particularly off. He remembers Dawn sitting on the edge of a bathtub at the worksite, visibly upset, but he wasn't sure why. Another detail that stood out to him was that Dawn was driving the Subaru that day. Normally, Candace drove that vehicle, but on June 14th, Dawn had his tools in it and was using that instead of his usual truck. Dudley claims this was the only time in their 2 months working together that he saw Dawn drive the Subaru. Dawn was also driving it the next day, June 15th, when Summer disappeared. Dudley also shared concerning observations about Dawn's home life. He claimed that when Candace visited the job sites, she and Dawn would often argue. He also recalled seeing Dawn bring his children to work sites, sometimes allowing them, especially Summer, to climb on things he felt were unsafe. Even more troubling, Dudley alleged that he once saw Dawn smoking marijuana with his then 12-year-old son and witnessed Dawn physically abusing 2 of the boys. After being fired on June 14th, Dudley went to Don's home to collect his final paycheck days later, only to be shorted on payment. When he asked if there was any news about Summer, who was already missing at that point, Don allegedly got upset with him for bringing it up. While Don has accused Dudley of being involved, and Dudley has raised serious concerns about Don's behavior, there has been no public evidence linking either man directly to Summer's disappearance. Could Summer's disappearance have been the result of an accident that was covered up? If we accept Candace's timeline as accurate, it seems unlikely that they would have had time to dispose of a body undetected, given the extensive searches conducted. Despite ongoing suspicion, no concrete evidence has tied Don or Candace to Summer's disappearance. Both reportedly passed polygraph tests, though the exact questions asked are unknown, which leaves plenty of room for debate. Each theory has details that seem plausible, but also contradictions. That's what makes this case so difficult. The people close to the Wells family who have spoken out all seem to have different opinions on what really happened to Summer. One thing we have to remember is that we don't have access to all of the evidence that law enforcement does. Investigators will always keep certain details private, and there may be information that would change how we see the entire case if only we knew it. At this point, the most important thing we can do is ensure Summer isn't forgotten. Share her story. Share her age progression photo. Until there's evidence to say otherwise, we must continue to hope that she is still out there. Even as the years pass, Summer's community continues to keep her memory alive. Every year on June 15th, the anniversary of her disappearance, people gather to celebrate her life and release butterflies in her honor on Summer's Day. The day also serves as a reminder to bring awareness to other missing persons cases. Each holiday season, a purple Christmas tree, Summer's Christmas tree, is set up in a mall in Kingsport and decorated with butterflies and ornaments featuring the faces of missing children, ensuring that stories like Summer's are never forgotten. If you have any credible information that could help law enforcement locate Summer, please contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-TBI-FIND. Summer's community continues fighting to keep her memory alive because every missing child deserves to be found. Let's continue sharing her story, holding on to hope, and never giving up until Summer is home. No matter the outcome, every voice matters. The victims, their families, and the difficult questions these stories leave behind. And if there's a story you think I should cover, please feel free to leave it in the comments. You're part of the reason these voices still have power, and I appreciate you being here. If you're looking for another story with just as many unanswered questions, I think you'd be really interested in the case of Noah Pressgrove, a young man whose death after a wild party has left more confusion than answers. Click here to watch that video. I'll see you there.